And looking at this, I think I am going to run the breather right there, and that's going to be the only place I'm going to use a zip tie. What's up, Speedy's Garage gang? Welcome back to the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel. Today I'm going to knock out what I think will be a pretty quick project. Knock on wood, I don't want to jinx myself. And it's stuff, I've had the parts in the toolbox for probably a year. I'm just now getting around to it. And it's going to be an extended differential breather on the rear differential of the 3rd gen 4Runner. For whatever reason, Toyota chose to extend the differential breather on the front differential from the factory. This one's a 4x4, but they didn't do it on the back, and I have no idea why. I'll show you where they extended the factory front differential here in just a second. There's a few pretty cheap, simple parts you'll need to get this done, and it should really be about a 10-minute job if you do it right. So let me show you what I've got. We're gonna get after it. So first, I'm gonna tell you why it might matter. I'm not gonna say it always does, because this vehicle is 21 years old and I haven't really had a problem, but there's a little vent, and I'll have to show it to you in a second because it's kind of hard to see, on the top of the differential back here, and it sits right on the top pretty much of the diff, right by the axle. This is your differential, and as this thing works, as the gears turn and the fluid heats up, it can create positive pressure inside the differential, and you want to have a one-way valve that lets pressure out but doesn't let anything come in, and that's what you have, is a little valve cap kind of on the top of the differential, and it helps to equalize the pressure if any builds up in the diff. What can happen is, say you drive through deep water and now it cools the differential really quickly. It can let water come in or muck get into the little valve cap and clog it up. Well, now your differential heats up, there's nowhere for that pressure to go, and it can actually blow the axle seals, believe it or not. And the reason I decided to do this is when I replaced the axle seals a while back, I thought, you know, I'm gonna check the differential breather, make sure it's good, and it was. If it's clogged up, you can't blow through it. So I checked mine, it was still fine, but I thought, you know, I'm gonna go ahead and extend it just to get it out of the gook of everyday driving. Number one, I don't intend to drive this thing in super deep water where I would submerge the axle, but if I'm ever camping or something and happen to do that, I wanna know that breather is up high enough that it won't get water ingested into it, and I won't have to worry about that. So that's the reason we're actually gonna do this. And on a lot of the Toyota Land Cruisers, they extended it from the factory, both the front and rear differential breathers. I don't know why on the 4Runner they only did the front one. So I'm gonna show you where the front one is, just so you know and can tell that they actually did extend it from the factory. So here's where it's at. So there are actually two of them right there on the driver's side fender. One is for sure the front differential. I think it is the back one, but don't hold me to that. The other one, I believe, is for the transmission. So they've got breathers on those, again, extended up pretty high. You see it's actually taller than the front tire would be. Again, no idea why they didn't do something for the back. And here's what you're gonna need to get it done. It's pretty basic. I got 6 feet of this, what is this, 3/8 OD hose. I want to keep me honest here. 5/16 inch is what it says. So it's fuel line. I believe that would be ID, so 5/16 ID fuel line for that. You might need a little bit larger, just in case there's any areas where it might rub. You can actually put your hose inside the hose and use this as a abrasive abatement if you needed to. You're gonna need a breather cap. So this is very similar to the one that's on top of the differential. The one on the differential just happens to be threaded in, and it's right on top, so it's like that tall. This will obviously go into your hose where we're gonna extend it. You need a couple of clamps. You can use, some people use these. If you're careful, you can. I don't like to use these in most cases. I like to use what are called fuel line clamps. Same principle as a worm gear clamp, I think is what these are mostly called. But you'll notice the edges of this one is rolled back, and it's to protect your line. So you could use something like that, but I like to make things look as factory as I can, and Toyota likes to use these spring clamps. So I'm actually going to use a couple of those. They will seal the hose up just fine. The important thing, the big thing you're going to need is, it's called a Toyota Union. And this will obviously fit also inside the other end of your hose. Make sure you get the right one. Notice this one has like a pipe thread taper to it. I actually bought 2 of them because I wasn't sure. Both had the same part number, but this one does not have that pipe thread. You do not want this one. If it's not tapered a little bit, it's the wrong one. And the part number, 90404-51319. And I'll leave a link in the description of all of this stuff. The other things you might need are a couple of plastic clips. There's a protector or plastic housing back by the passenger or driver's side rear wheel that you have to fool with. If you break the clips, you'll need new of those. I'm going to use a 19mm socket with my impact to get the tire off to give me more working area. Something to cut the hose with. I'm anal about stuff. I don't want it cut perfectly straight. You can just use a razor blade if you're more accurate with a razor blade than I am, but I'm going to use these hose cutters. You might need some push pins. I've got a pack of those. These are not in it, unfortunately, but I might need them for something else, not sure. And then finally, I've got an assortment of rubber insulated clamps. So that's what I'm going to use to actually mount the hose. You could use zip ties. Again, I like it to make it look factory, so I'm going to use these, and it's the 1/2 inch size out of this kit. So you just need, I'm thinking 1/2 inch probably is going to be plenty of these rubber clamps. So that's it, other than one bolt for this clamp. And I'm sorry, I don't know the thread pitch of this, but there's a metal sort of clamp back at the back of the vehicle on the driver's side that holds fuel lines and other things. I'm actually going to replace one of those bolts. This one's just 1/8 of an inch longer, and this clamp's about 1/8 of an inch thick, and that'll help that fit. This is just a bag of Toyota bolts I happen to have from projects past, and I know this is the right size, but it's a little 10mm. If you remove a wheel like I'm going to, you'll need a torque wrench that goes to 83 foot-pounds for your lug nuts. And that little 10mm bolt that I'm talking about, I took a look, and it's kind of in a weird spot, or at least the one I'm going to use. So I've got a little 10mm wobbly on an extension, a little ratchet I'm going to use for that guy. I've got the truck jacked up. I've got it on a jack stand. You've heard me say this a million times. Do not work on a vehicle just on a jack. The jack isn't really doing anything. It's just sitting there. All the weight is on the jack stand. I can get the rear tire off now. You will need to release the parking brake. So I did chock the wheel, and now we're going to release the parking brake, even though it's still in park and the passenger side tire's on the ground. I like to be safe, not sorry. It was hard for me to show you this, but all I did was take a flat blade screwdriver, and there's these little plastic tabs. This is that shield I talked about. So a lot of the factory fuel hoses run up behind this, and that's a good place to put our extended diff breather. So what I did is I took a flat blade screwdriver and I released the clips. Those on the back there for these bottom two, and just let them ease forward. There's two more up here in the top. I'm not going to fool with. I think that will give us enough room to work with. And I didn't break the clips, so you don't have to destroy them to get them out, but I will leave a link in the description in case you break yours. Hopefully I've got the camera position where you can see, but right back here, right beside the parking brake line, is the little vent cap that we need to remove, and it is a 14mm, and a deep well socket is a good tool to use to remove it. So there's what we were after. If your truck is particularly nasty, you probably want to use a brush or something and clean off the top of the differential before you remove this so that no debris falls in the diff. But that's what we're going to replace and extend to keep it out of harm's way. And I've got the union prepared with just a little bit of Teflon tape, probably optional. The factory vent cap did not have this, but I'm a belt and suspenders kind of guy, so why not? And now we're just going to thread this back in where the original vent cap came out. And this one is a 12mm, and a deep well socket, again, works pretty well. You don't want to crank on it, you just want it snug. There's a little bit better look of it installed, and now we're just going to connect up the hose and run it into the little plastic area we removed the tabs from earlier. It might help if you put a little bit of soapy water or some alcohol in your hose, help it slide on that union a little bit better, a little bit easier, and then just seat the clamp. Keep in mind that your brake line runs right up against where that vent was and where our new union is. So you don't want any sharp edges of whatever type of clamp you use resting against the brake line. Now, it's under a little bit of tension right now because the suspension is fully drooped, but it's not, you know, going to cause any problems. If the parking brake were on and the suspension were drooped, that would be pretty tight. So that would be a rare occurrence, but you still don't want to take any chances. There's the bracket I was telling you about. So these are fuel line related lines. This is the main fill tube actually. And I think right there on the end would be a really good place for the rubber grommet. And we just run our extended breather through it and right over with the rest of the hoses. So I'm going to start by removing this 10mm bolt. And because of that angle, you can see why a wobbly is a nice tool here. I've got the clamp where I want it, and because I can, I put a little bit of anti-seize on this just because I don't want to have any rust issues later on. And now, hopefully if I hold my mouth right, I get this little sucker to start threading in. You want to make sure to leave enough of a loop so that if the suspension cycles, it won't pull your hose off of your union. So I kind of matched it up with the brake line. A little bit of a loop there. Got it in the clamp. If you need to adjust it, a little bit of alcohol on that will make it easier to slide the hose inside the clamp. And now, gotta tighten it up. Here's our new breather. A little bit of ouchie haul. Make that easier to go in there. There we go. Now, that'll work. Don't forget your spring clip or your hose clamp like I did, having to redo it. It's okay. Easy fix. Now, I'm going to zip tie it back. Try to give you a closer look. But there's how I set mine up. Now we just need to put the little plastic clips back in. Put the tire and wheel back on, we're good to go. And you can probably do this without removing the tire and wheel. There's enough room in there if you don't mind being a little cramped. I wanted to have plenty of room, number one. Number two, it made it easier for me to film and show it to you guys. And number three, it made sure the suspension, and this is most important, was fully drooped so that I knew how long to make my loop in my line. And with it fully drooped, I've still got a little bit of slack. I know I'm good to go. So there we go, a nice, quick, easy project that costs, I'd say, less than $20, maybe even less than $15, depending on where you get your parts. Again, I have no idea why Toyota did not extend the rear diff breather on the 4Runner when they did it on the Land Cruiser. Who knows? And that's not the only way to do it. If you don't like those little valves, little valve cap vents, you can also use a flow-through fuel filter. I've done that in the past on some 4x4s, a little bit bigger. so you'll have to kind of find a way to hide it. I think it would still fit in the same place I put mine, but that's another option you can use. And I really like this implementation because I only used one zip tie and one rubber hose clamp. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Be sure to check us out on Instagram. It's at Speedies_garage, as well as the website, www.speediesgarage.net, and hopefully I'll see you out there.